Without any further delay, coming to the brilliant masterclass on understanding business models and how pricing can be used as a strategic lever, let me give you a quick intro to our distinguished and eminent speaker, Vignesh Kumar. Vignesh has 16 plus years of experience across strategic consulting, product marketing and pricing, customer insights, analytics, and operations. His technological expertise lies in cloud computing. He is very active in startup ecosystem, mentoring young professionals and travel blogging. He has co-authored the World Wealth Report and Asia Pacific Wealth Report that was jointly published by Capgemini and Merlin Lynch Global Wealth Management. Vignesh holds a postgraduate diploma from SPJN Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai. Now, I would like to hand over the session to Vignesh. Vignesh, you can go ahead and continue the session.
Thanks, Pragya. Thanks for the introduction. And yeah, I think great to see a set of folks on a Saturday morning. I think it just shows the commitment that you all have towards your area of interest. Yeah, I think I'll just it's the next 90 minutes. I'll try to keep. I have few slides. Obviously, I would go through the slides, but the idea about the session is to keep it as interactive as possible. Uh, just leverage whatever I have done in my past. If you feel any questions are relevant, do feel to drop in the question on chat window, and I'll try to take it as and when things go. I don't want to pile it up at the Q&A side and then basically lose the flow there. So keep it interactive. I think that's the best way we can get value out of this 2 hours that we have basically have from, yeah, maybe another 1 hour, 50 minutes from here. So without any further ado, let me just quickly share my screen. Let me know if you can see my slide and we can get started. I hope my slide is visible. Yeah.
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you, Ragya. So yeah, I think let's first try to understand before I get started into the technicalities of stuff and other deep concepts. Um, where does this topic as such, the topic of why should someone who is in this product management space understand these concepts at a high level, right? Like, why should we know about what's a business model? How do we basically go about building a business model? And what's the big deal about the pricing as a strategic lever, right? Like, so to give a gist about why business models have become very critical in our current world is as you see, the business models these days have become extremely agile, sort of like gone are those days where you can basically design a business model for, say, a period of a year or two, then basically experiment it for a year and launch it and then basically revamp it. Like, you can't have a cycle time anymore of 3 years or 4 years. Those were things of the past, right? Like, current agile world where everything is basically moving towards customer focus, customer centric, customer demand. Um, you have to understand the business models and react to any situation that comes out of the ecosystem. And that's where I think, as leaders, as product managers, it becomes very, very important for all of us to clearly get an idea about what's the tenets of a business model. Where should the focus be when it comes to business models? How do you go about building a business model? And once you have a business model, how do you basically make it work? How do you basically make it more and more customer centric and exactly to the problem that you're trying to solve? So that's the reason I thought about having this session where we talk about business models. And one of the key areas where I basically have started been very active is on the pricing side, right? Like, and pricing, as you know, is a very important a lever for refining your business model, getting the maximum out of what your business model is. So there are two phases of this presentation or the class. One would be a very high level talk about the business model as such. You will get to know some of it might be a repetition for the folks here, but the idea is you get a glimpse about what's the business model looking like, and then basically how do you basically go about using strategic lever of pricing in your tenants. Just give me 1 second, I'll be back. Yeah. So let's get quickly started. So what is a business model, right? Like at the core of any business model, you will see these three things being discussed widely. Like if you are a product manager building a business model for, say, your product, or as you scale up and get into the leadership, you might start building business models at a group level, at a org level, then at a corporate level. Business models can keep scaling, right? And at the core, whatever be the level at which you are doing, is it for individual products or individual features, or it could be anything that we spoke about, there are three major areas that you all need to understand when it comes to business model. One is, what's the value creation that you are delivering in that business model? I'll talk about it in detail, because unless we understand this, there is no way we're going to appreciate why pricing is a strategic lever. So at the core is value creation. Then there's something that all of us need to understand, which is basically profit model and the business model as such, the business logic as such, right? So let's go one by one, right? Like what is a price, the value creation? I mean, that's the, for me at least, that's the fundamental question, or fundamental pillar that leads to a product management mindset, right? Like, or that leads to basically the concept of creating a product. Because what is it that you're basically trying to do with the product? It's not like you will design the product, have a product, and then go basically to the market and hunt for where can I sell the product. That's not the mindset of a successful product manager, or for that matter, that business will not thrive and succeed, because you are not able to relate to what exactly is the market asking for. So when you are basically doing a value creation exercise, the most important things are customers, and the problem that you're trying to solve for the customer, right? Like at the core of designing any product, we all need to understand that end of the day, a product solves a customer problem. Example, if take any example, right? Like why do you have apps on your like all the travel apps, all the cab aggregator apps that we have on our mobiles, etc. Why does a Ola or a Uber, even why do we even download them in the first place, right? Like think about it in that way. Like then there is a need, right? Like look at I think there was a very nice conversations that we were having. I mean, I'm not sure what's the audience age group that's there, but people like us who are in that 40-ish sort of, we were relating to the old style of booking a cab, or the experiences that we used to have. Like if we had to go to the airport, we had to basically at least ensure twice that, hey, the person will be available the next day morning, who is going to come, what's the number. Before going to bed, you will remind that person that please come down tomorrow at this time, etc., etc., right? And it was not that the customer was king at that point in time. The customer felt like, as at that moment, I felt like I was at mercy of the other side, because if they don't turn up, my entire plan to travel basically goes bust. And flip that model to what we are now, right? Like I see people canceling, like even my some of my cousins and all who are the millennials and very young, they don't even have to, if they cancel cabs because they're not getting it in 2 minutes, they're not getting it in 3 minutes, 5 minutes and above. They select the option saying that, hey, it's too late, I can't wait, and they're canceling the call. So see the shift in mindset of a customer. Like for me, that is the biggest lesson as a product manager that you need to understand, right? Like the mindset of the customer changes dramatically as time goes by. Like what in the past was acceptable is not even a topic of discussion anymore. I don't think anyone in the current world even goes and checks with your Uber guy a day before that, hey, you will come down, right? And all those kind of stuff. So when you are trying to solve a problem, that's when a product basically starts coming up. An idea comes up first. It all starts with an idea to address the problem, and then you basically start trying to solutionize it, and then say that, hey, when the solution looks like good enough, and that's what is called as the minimal viable product, right? Like when you have an MVP product, That's when you basically say, hey, can I go and basically show this as a solution to the problem that the customer basically has? And that's the genesis of value creation, right? There are a lot of points here. You can go through it. We obviously have to understand who are our customers. Like, it's no point in basically building a product for a wrong set of like customers. Example, there's no point in having high-end gaming like a product for 60 plus sort of a customer. Yes, there will be exceptions. There are people who are going to be 60 plus doing hardcore gaming, but you'll not find your complete target audience in that particular customer segment, right? So knowing your customers are extremely important. Then what is the product or service that is being offered? That is what I spoke about. Like, one has to really understand what is it, the product or the minimal viable product at least that you have to basically give to the customer. Example, again, I'll give you some examples that you all can relate to so that it makes it easy for you, right? When Spotify basically came into the industry, what do you think Spotify really had as their MVP? They didn't want to basically build all those playlists and the all the jazz that they have currently in their Spotify premium and all those stuff, right? That was not the intention with which they would have started. Actually, if you go and read their history, their intention to start was, there were a lot of IP related problems when P2P platforms, point to peer platforms, which were sharing files like Napsters and all. The genesis of the problem was there were a lot of lawsuits which were being filed on Napsters and other P2P platforms because people felt that confidential IP data was being like misused and transferred. And to Spotify didn't try to solve the entire problem. They just took a niche out of that Napster P2P issues and said, hey, people are looking for music. And when they go and download it from these P2P sites, they're actually on the wrong side of IP laws. So why can't we make a product which basically helps people streamline their entire business, right? Like you can just basically download and you can just basically upload. The actual content creators are uploading the music, and consumers are in an ethical way they're downloading and consuming it. And there comes the idea of creating a product, right? And see how nicely it can be basically put together. So that's where understanding a product and services becomes extremely important. And yeah, how are you creating value? Like as you see, like the solution need not be that you solve an existing problem in totality. You can always take up one piece of it and make it extremely razor focused, and your focus is razor focused on that particular problem. You solve it and then you make value out of it. So what value are you creating for the customer? That is very important. And what part of the value chain are you targeting? That's very critical. I mean, especially for people who are starting in the startup ecosystem and who are basically pretty new to the concept of doing product launches. Your product might be just one piece of that value chain that you're delivering end to end, right? Like example, if you take us a travel end to end, there could be a lot of things. Booking could be one thing, then cabs could be one thing, then basically your flights and your actual in transit experience, your lot of things, right? From like the point you decide to travel to the point you reach that destination, there are so many things that comes in that value chain, right? So do you want to address that entirely? Like for all you know, sometimes you can look at it. Make My Trip can be one which tries to expand across the spectrum. I think they focused initially on the bookings part, and now they have slowly moved their experience across the value system, the value chain, right? Because you can book taxis, you can book hotels, you can book everything basically on that platform. And that's how they are trying to spread across the value chain. So now when you are designing your product, the key question that you need to ask is like, am I going to be across the spectrum, or should I just basically go and look at the value chain in a bit, or how do I go about? So that's very, very critical, because you don't want to be expanding too quickly and trying to exhaust your limited resources that you have. And last, yes, go-to-market strategy. I cannot emphasize how important the GTM is when it comes to launching your products. If we do not have a clear-cut idea about how we are going to take it, is it through the channel partners? Is it through our direct interactions with the customers? There could be different GTM strategies for your B2B business and B2C business. So all those key questions basically have to be addressed. And these all questions, the answers, if you start getting for all these key questions, actually formulates into your value creation as a pillar. And now you can maybe appreciate why value creation is so important as an exercise, because everything else falls apart if you basically do not get this value creation part clearly defined, right? So um, moving on to the next pillar, right? Like if you have any questions or you want to discuss any points on this topic, I know it's a huge topic in itself, but if you feel there is anything that needs to be re-emphasized or you want to go in depth, drop a note and I'll be more than happy to take it up from there. The next one is obviously when you have defined all these your value creation, and you have everything available, your research is done, you basically have your hypothesis tested, etc. You will have to start focusing on your profit model. I mean, I know there are different maturities at which the companies operate, right? Like maybe the startups in their early phase at this point in time might be just looking at how to even look at value creation. Like how do you basically that's how cash burn happens, right? You burn cash to basically even test and get your value creation correctly at the correct at the first place. But once your maturity starts coming in, and once you are basically ready to scale, the most critical thing that people start asking is like, hey, when are you going to be profitable? And how many times in the recent past have you seen this question pop up in the startup ecosystem, right? Like, yes, it's great, you have understood the problem, you have a product, but yeah, are you profitable? And for that, every company basically has to look at, and as a product manager, when you launch your product, you have to understand what are the profit drivers for your particular product. And that's the culmination of the accumulation or the aggregation of all the products. Profit model is what eventually becomes the actual profitability of that BU or business unit. And when across the BUs, there is a profitability talk, the accumulation of that becomes the profitability of the company, right? So do not overlook this, because I see sometimes people so razor focused on their product building experience that they're all neck deep in trying to see, hey, what features can I add, what new cool like gigs can be added into my product. And somehow when the question comes at a leadership level, when the presentation happens and the business unit leader just flips that and asks like, hey, good, a lot of good stuff you have spoken, but what's the dollar uptick that you are trying to bring here? And that's when the $1 million question pops up, right? Like, hey, I have to be profitable at some point in time. And that's why understanding your key revenue drivers, like how are you going to monetize this entire experience of your product? What's the different types of monetization? What types of like revenue generation will you try to put together in this entire exercise? Second most important thing, profitability. Obviously, one is the revenue, the selling point, and going back to our school days, right? SP and CP. What is the cost? So cost has to be baked in. In a cost plus model for companies where it becomes easier, but for companies which are more value centric, which are more especially in the software business and all, understanding costs is a critical factor. And how do you get there is in itself a topic of discussion, right? Because value-based pricing, I'll briefly touch upon in the future slides, but it's a vast field where there are like tons and tons of research that's basically being done on value-based. And finally, what are the key drivers for profitability, right? Like there are one of the lever is pricing, and we are going to talk about it today, but there are multiple other levers also that basically define profitability, right? Like how do you optimize your product portfolio? How do you basically try to minimize your costs? How do you basically expand into new geographies? Are you creating a new segment, or are you getting into a new segment and basically trying to capture the market, etc. So there are a lot of key drivers that you can play around when it comes to profitability. And that's where key metrics like customer acquisition cost, retention cost, etc. and all basically becomes very important. Like you might be burning a lot initially to in the customer acquisition CAC tag and all, right? Like when you're basically acquiring a customer, initially 1 year, 2 years, until people know your product, for all you know, you might be burning your cash, and that's why your costs are high. But eventually, you should be successful enough to turn them around. So that's on the profit model. And I know there are a few questions popping, I guess, but let me just wrap this slide and then we can take it up. And the last one, I'm not going to discuss this in today's presentation for the simple reason that I think I can, when you come to business logic, I think you can have at least 3 to 4 master classes on the topic itself, because each of the point that you talk about is huge. Like the business logic is basically challenging your existence. Like, what is the logic of your business? And I think we are all blessed to be in a place where I think there are so many programs like Shark Tanks and others which are really showing this in the most entertaining fashion, right? Like you will not, that's exactly what they try to evaluate at first when a pitch is made, right? What's the logic? Like, is there even any rationale for this business to even thrive? Simple example, I don't know how many of you understand this, right? Sorry, have watched this episode. I think it was in the US Shark Tank where someone came up with a radical idea that I will implant a Bluetooth chip inside your ear itself, so that you can always be having devices connected without even removing it, or some wacky idea like this, which required a surgery for you to be implanting it. People didn't even go into the value creation and profit model discussions. The sharks basically just said, is this even logical? Like your basic premise of business logic itself is not resonating with us, and for obvious reasons, no one even went into the discussion on valuations and other stuff. So that's the first point. Second is adoption curves, right? Like absolutely critical. Like as I said, each company, each product, everything basically has a different, could be in different adoption phases. Like for all you know, you as a product manager, if you go at a principal or a group level, you might be dealing with 3 products or 4 products, and each product might be in their own maturity curve. One could be like kind of like in the last phase where they're like decline phase. One could be in the maturity phase. One could be in the growth phase. So how do you basically think of them together, but at the same time handle them separately, because they all are different? It's like raising 3 children, right? Each child, even though you are parent to all 3 of them, you will not apply the same template across a 3-year-old, 5-year-old, and a 10-year-old, right? Like you are going to handle them, talk to them differently, etc. Similarly, when the product, you handle 3 to 4 different products, you have to understand where they are in their maturity curve and their adoption curves, and all those important aspects has to be baked in before you go ahead and build your business logic. And the last, very critical, I think this sometimes gets really overlooked. Network effects makes or breaks your product success factors. I think again I'll go back to the Spotify example, because the key assumption that Spotify did at that point in time was like a bandwidth of the data, the internet will keep increasing. Like I think when Spotify came, we were roughly in the 2G 3G transition, and their premise was, see, the technology in telecom is moving at this pace where in another 4 years people can download even gigabytes, maybe in minutes time or 2 minutes time or max 5 minutes time. And they knew the second premise was, hey, look at this. I mean, there is already devices which are being launched like iPhones, which are basically smartphones where people will have 64 gigabyte of storage, and they can they have the end user device where they can screen, they can choose this songs, store it and play it, and all the interactive features that can be given in that particular app, right? So these two premises were where they basically, it's more like a networking effect, right? Because remove these two things from the equation, would Spotify be successful? Highly debatable. I don't think you would go into your laptop and basically launch Spotify and then start listening to music, right? It's not it would have never been that successful had it not been almost every day in our devices which we carry in our arms. Second, another very classic one that people keep telling to me, and I love that example, is the automobile and the fuel equation. They both go hand in hand. If you don't have motors, there's no consumption of fuel. Similarly, if there is no fuel, there is no existence of automotive industry. Yes, we are going into EV and all those stuff, but fundamentally what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of networking effects when it comes to your product. And unless you basically understand the nuances of that networking effect, you might be shooting in the dark, because for all you know, at a standalone, your product might be extremely successful. But when you bake in the network effects, you might not be a successful success story. And that's where I think many products fail, because you, end of the day, we don't try to see the network effects of how things might pan out. Okay, that's the three major pillars. I took some time here because this is the crux of what the entire presentation is. I'm sure the remaining slides we can go through far more quicker, but the business model is the three tenets of business model have to be understood before we even go ahead. So let me quickly see, what is there a question or? Okay, I see some. What frameworks can be used for quantifying the value? Okay, value-based pricing is often talked about, but the most tricky part appears to be the quantification of value. Yes, I think there is no. Okay, yeah, I think to address to your question, I'm not sure whose question was that. One second. Yeah, Ravi. So frameworks. Yes, if you look at it, it's going to be an extremely iterative process here when you're trying to do a value-based pricing. I'm going to talk about it later, but since you have asked this question, I'll just quickly touch base and we'll talk about it in the subsequent slides, right? See, value-based pricing is a very tricky art, for sure. I'm not going to deny that at all, because at the genesis, at the core of a value-based pricing, you need to keep testing the market to understand what exactly is the value for that product that you're delivering. And how do you do that? Is basically two things, right? Like I'll talk about it actually in the next two slides. Like it's about going to the market with MVP at the right time. It's about doing a lot of A/B testing, doing price tests, basically getting the data back. And once you have the data, you basically start leveraging your analytical skills and your other models to basically start doing simulations to see how much of an impact it basically delivers. I'll talk about it immediately. So I'll maybe just touch this and we'll go in depth into the next slides and see how it goes. Okay, so now that you have seen this, let's find what is the product market fit, right? Like I think this is where every product manager eventually has to somehow, it sounds very easy to land at that intersection where product, market, and price meets. But trust me, it's extremely tough for us to basically get into that niche spot, which is like the bullseye at the center, right? So, and many a times, all these three bubbles are of not the same size. So that becomes the biggest challenge. Imagine two bubbles which are huge, and the third bubble is like a small bubble coming in. That makes it even more tougher to find a sweet spot in between. So obviously, what's the product market fit that we are talking about? At the core, there are three things that needs to be solved or looked upon, right? You need to know and you need to design the product that addresses the problem. You have to have a product ready. You have to have your MVP, which is at least giving you which is solving the fundamental problem. The frills, the nice to have features, good to have features, they might not be required, but the must have features need to be there. Example, if you're designing a car, you can't say I'll put brakes as a must, like a nice to have or a good to have, right? It is more of a must have. If I don't have brake, I don't have a car. As simple as if I don't have a steering wheel, I don't have a car. Similarly, AC, do you need an air condition? That could be a nice to have. Do you need power windows? Again, nice to have. Do you need windows? Debatable. Some people might say, I don't care. I don't need a window. And some might say, no, I really need a window. So these things are very important when you're designing a product and you basically come up with your MVP. And that has to be there for you to go ahead. Second, timely launch, absolutely critical. I can't really, I can talk a lot about some of the examples in my own like the life, and I can tell you that if it's not hitting the market at the right time, you see so many products basically not even thriving, right? Like you can see a lot of examples around you. What happened to those pagers which basically came and just burnt and went away? Like it was not because they were not good. It was because the market changed. What happened to the film rolls of Kodak, the old Nokia as a business, like Xerox as a business? All these, if you look at it, right, like they they might have not come back with products at a timely basis to counter to the market, the changes that were happening. I mean, it's hard to believe that the digital transformation of photography was not being preempted by Kodak, right? Like they had everything going, and it's just that they missed the bus because some other wacky side of the industry came in and they threw in smartphones with digital photography enabled, and that's how the entire industry changed. Yes, we still have the DSLRs and others which are absolutely critical, but still the market penetration when it comes to photography now is not actually at that side, right? Like people take photos anywhere, everywhere with that devices. Similarly, some of the smartphones which came in the market might have come at a time which was far ahead of their curve. I don't know how many of you know about the Dell Streaks that came in even before iPhone came. But for all you know, again, the network effect might have worked against them, because what good is a smartphone if your data and your internet is not supporting your device? So maybe that's the reason timely launch of your product becomes extremely critical, and optimize the product to the target customer segment. This is an iterative one, right? Like if you see that you launched 6 product features, and the most spoken about feature is like feature number 2, and the most cribbed or most disliked feature, or people are raising a lot of queries on forums and others about feature number 6, here is your opportunity to basically optimize your next version of the product. You might want to take away all the there are 2 ways to look at it. Yes, you might want to go and validate whether that's a must have feature, like how critical is that in the must have. Like security, if your security is really weak, you can't just basically say, okay, people are cribbing about my security, so let me just take that feature out of it. But if that feature was more like animation enhancement or emojis or something which basically gave a great experience, but you basically can live with that subpar, or you don't want to even expose that subpar feature at that point in time, you might want to pull it back, or you might want to just take it out of your beta, and you focus on your like a must the top feature, and try to make it even better so that the reach goes even further. So it's about there are multiple, there's no right or wrong answer here at all, right? It's at the moment data driven analysis, you basically start optimizing your product. And if you just overlook this, there is no way you're going to honor the feedback that you're getting from your customers. So optimizing all 3 points, these are the ones for products. Then you look at the market. I think we have spoken everything at length. I'm not going to again spend time. You have to understand the problem. You have to know the customer segmentation. You need to have a good go-to-market strategy. And finally, you need to understand the demand, estimating the market potential. And I cannot, I mean, I can tell you many times where people overestimate the market size. It's so easy to basically, I mean, I've seen so many presentations, and when I consult some of the startups, the first question when we come into like, hey, what is your market potential? I see this big slide coming in, right? Like, hey, IDC predicted that there can be 600 billion market here. I'm going to focus on APJ, which is going to be 1/10 or 1/5. So that gives me around, let's say, 20 billion to play out of the 100 billion. And in the 20 billion, blah, blah, blah. And they come up with an exorbitant number, which is like, hey, this is my total addressable market. And it just sometimes looks so flat that, hey, is this the market reality that you're talking about? So the critical thing is Validate your claims. Yes, these exercises give you a head start, because you now at least know that there is a market, there is a X number of dollars available. But before even claiming that that is your true market potential, go and do some tests. Go and find out, is this actually translating into what your analysis is, or the test that you run completely show a different picture altogether. And yes, finally, we'll slowly come into the price point discussion, right? Like, pricing is based on a perceived value of the product, right? Like, it's not about you basically deciding the product and saying, hey, I would want to price it at this point, a price point, unless there are few exceptions. Like, you can do that when even now, I think Apple is also slowly feeling the heat, but Apple has been doing that for quite some time, where they basically played on the perceived value of the product. And they still are encashing some of the perceived value, and they are doing the price skimming that we talk about, right? Like, they are basically taking the top layer of the premium pricing, and that's how it's going. And the last, customer first. Pricing is an iterative process, and it's based on customer feedback. I think the value-based pricing question came in, so we'll keep touching from here how we can keep getting closer to the value-based. That unless we go to the customers and basically ask them, how much would you pay for this particular product, you will not get the correct value of that particular product. Example, someone who values time would invest in a automobile or in a car, which basically takes person A from point A to point B at a faster pace. That's it. They might invest in that. But if you change the persona of the customer, a customer who wants to go from point A to point B safely, I mean, the probability of going from point A to point B safely, they want to increase by 100%. I don't think speed might be the big determinant for that particular customer. For them, it will look into other areas, right? Like build quality, safety features, this, that, and all. So understanding the customer is super critical. And when you price your product accordingly to the customer's expectation, that's when you start getting the market. If you price your right product, example, the top end safety, safe car to a particular customer whose persona is safety, even if you charge a premium of 1 lakh, they're not going to have a problem. They might take it. But if you take that same package and go to a person who wants to go faster, it's going to fall flat. For all you know, the brand is basically getting diluted in front of a persona like that. So that's where I think price can be used positively, and in many a times price also starts looking has a negative impact on the perception of the product. Okay, I think this kind of moves us to the next one, which I think was the question that was floated, right? Like, how do we basically get to this ideal point? Like, if you want to get into this center of this bubble Venn diagram, how do you basically slowly move price and overlap it onto the product and market intersection, right? And that is the skill that basically differentiates the different product managers. That's how I would put it. Because if everyone could do that almost like identical, or if there was a framework, or if there was a methodology which like the Porter's 5 forces, or say the BCG matrix, if it was so simple, I'm sure all product managers would be successful and everyone would be identical, right? The skill of getting that overlap using the value-based pricing is where I think the crux of the discussion is. And this is a high-level framework that basically, or I would say a process, this is actually a process which is time and again given results to every one of us when we basically are trying to build our product and get that sweet spot. How do you get into that product market fit? So at the core, if you look at it, is it all starts with data and analysis. And I totally can understand the plight of some of the product managers who have no baseline to fall upon, right? Like, the question immediately, many a times when I flash this, the first question that people ask is like, hey Vignesh, what if I'm going to create a new category, or I'm going to create a new segment or a product has no peers or comparison. It's like almost like starting afresh. Yes, that's the most toughest situation that a product manager can have. But at the same time, think about it. I usually think about it in this way, right? Like it's so, uh, I mean, the hypothesis that you would be testing in with a product like that is so innovative. Because if there is no such product available in the market, imagine how many questions or how many wide lenses you can, how many different lenses you can use to basically do your analysis. But yes, if you have to really quantify what data analysis is all about, you can either look at it from in a mature product. Obviously you have data available, so you basically start running your quantitative models. Like you can do a lot of conjoint analysis, factor analysis, which basically tells about the what's the independent and dependent variables, how they basically coexist, and what's the influence of, say, a dependent variable when it changes. How does it impact all the independent variable, how it basically impacts all the dependent variables. So a lot of analysis can be done when you get data back from the customers, right? Like, and that's the ideal model that all of us want to eventually land. But what if we basically do not have data to start with? That's when I think the qualitative aspect comes in, and this is slightly more time consuming, because now you are going to do more things from direct interactions with customers, right? Like you're going to go do more. I'm sure many of you would have already done this in your past. You would have done the focus group discussions, you would have done primary research, secondary research. You would have spoken to people from different geographies in a form of interviews, surveys, and that's how you slowly start building your hypothesis and building data to support or reject your hypothesis. And these questions, which are initially starting as qualitative analysis, slowly they move towards like you translate the data of these qualitative research into a quantitative, and that's when you start putting together data and use it eventually using the first techniques that we spoke about. So that's where it all starts. And then basically you go and launch the product with an MVP product. You onboard your customers. Once you have your beta customers, they are like the evangelists of your product. Choosing your beta customers is very, very important. I'll just highlight a use case about in the next slide. I'll talk about a use case about Dropbox, how they basically built themselves and how they basically captured customers. So the idea is launch your MVP, let people come as beta customers, free trials, initial early adopters, and then from there you take feedback and you come back to you come back to your product iteration, the third phase, which is learn and iterate. This is where you build or enhance the data set, and you basically get it from the market, you get it from customers, you are getting all the data back, and you're going to prepare your next step of qualitative and quantitative analysis. If there is good enough data already generated, you might directly go into good modeling concepts. You might want to start looking at network effects and all those kind of deep dive conjoint analysis, etc. and all. But if you still feel that data is not good enough, the quality, it's not always about the amount of data that you have, right? The quality of data also really matters. And if you feel that the quality of data is still not good enough for you to derive good insights, we go back into this second layer. We go back and, hey, this is what we heard from the MVP launch. We would want to do a survey on how we can make this product even better, etc., etc. So it's a cycle that keeps going on. I think the smart product managers usually use this as frequently as possible. Obviously, you don't want to be in a state where you're constantly making corrections that it is confusing the customer, but you will have to bacon the feedback loop and be very cognizant of what your next release would look like, and it has to address the most spoken or the most important feedbacks that's coming back from the customers. Okay, I see there is a question. Let's quickly. Yes, I think Girish is asking network effects, right? Okay. So network effects, as I told in the previous slide, right? Like you really need to understand every feature or every product that you are launching basically has a ecosystem where it goes and plugs itself. Like standalone, a product might be good or bad only based on how well it is integrating with the ecosystem, right? Like example, again, it's very easy to understand this when you look at it from day-to-day activities that we do, right? Like the best of tires that we use has to, even why do we have different grades of tires that comes out in the market? Have you ever wondered, like, why can't we just have one size fits all sort of a tire that gets launched? All, like say the Michelins and the Bridgestones, they have great tires, but even there you basically have different configurations which basically is fitting into different solution, different machines, and then finally they are all meant to do different things, right? Like something that has to go on, say, a crossroad, or say some vehicles which has to go and into really rough terrain. Their expectations become very different, their requirements become very different. So network effect, in a way, how do you put it, is the dependencies that you have when you put in your product into a problem and try to see how it is solving the problem. Standalone, your product might not always address the problem. As I explained in the Spotify example, right? What good is your app if the phone doesn't have internet? Or your phone is so slow because your RAM and your storage is so slow that your music cannot, like say, process seamlessly. Like, if would you like to have a music with all the breaks or the buffering happening every 2 minutes or 2 seconds? That's not the experience. So the product in it is a great product that you might have landed. You might have said that, yes, this is amazing product that I've gotten. But there are a lot of other supplementary players that's going around, and that's where you might want to always look at your network, how the entire ecosystem pans out. And that's where I think it becomes very important for you to if you want to translate this into data, this is the independent and dependent variable equation that I was talking about. For you to be successful, which is like a dependent variable, there could be 15 independent variables which is basically at play. And each independent variable, the moment they go up or down by some basis points, they all could be having a positive or a negative impact on the overall dependent variable. And you also have to look at the interdependencies between the independent variables. So again, I don't want to go too deep into that data modeling and confuse all of you, because that's not the scope of the conversation. But there are complex models that I think I'm not a data scientist, but I work with few data scientists who talk about neural networks. They talk about the fishbone diagram, which basically it can be actually written in Python, where you can go and finally look at decision trees and others. And all those analytical stuff can be built only when you get data, quality data, and you are able to put together a relationship between the various factors that you have determined as data. I think that's where the conjoint analysis and all comes into play. We can talk a lot about it, but obviously AIML expert would add more value here rather than me. But when I talk to them in my when I work, I think that's where I get really fascinated, right? Like when I tell my business problem, the way they translate it into a analytical model is amazing, because they are able to understand the data. They're able to understand the different factors that are at play, and they try to build relationships between them. And once that model is built, that's when they start asking the question, Vignesh, do you want to do a correction with pricing, or do you want to look at different segment, or do you want to change the geography that you wanted to play? Or, like, all these are factors, right? Like, and once you start doing those simulations, you will see a lot of like analysis being thrown at you, and decisions obviously can be made based on those analysis. I see some questions. Okay, I see. I hope I addressed that, Girish. I think long answer, but yes, that's the that's what neural networking effect usually is. Okay. I think Shweta is asking a question, when we consider working on customer feedback to enhance the product, is there a recommended timeline on the frequency of releasing new features, enhancements, or what factors help in making this decision? Great question. Really good, very good question. So there's no rules of engagement here that, hey, customer basically gave a feedback, T+20, you have to have that addressed. No. It all depends upon, again, going back to that priority list that you started when you were designing your MVP. I think I'll take the example of Dropbox later, but let's take another example. I don't want to overkill with Spotify. Think about Google Maps. Every one of us uses Google Maps these days, right? And how do you think Google Maps would be releasing features as we speak? Like even now, I'm sure they are working on something cool and they would be releasing it. How do you think they do it? It's not like they basically say, yes, here, product managers of Google Map, okay, let's go, time's up. It's 2 days to go. Every 30 days, we are supposed to launch something. Let's do it. No, I don't think that ever is the play. That's not how usually the thinking goes about, right? It comes with a lot of experience and it comes with a lot of this iterative model that I'm talking about here. If you look at it, right, as you keep doing this 1, 2, 3 step 2, 3 times, you will start appreciating that and it's a very, very, it's like dealing with 2 sides of the spectrum, right? You design a product, you do the GTM strategy, you launch to the customer feedback comes through some global support services or your GSS team or your CX team, which is customer experience team. They keep constantly they constantly measure the positive vibes, the feedback and all those things that's coming. And that metrics comes back to the product team, right? The product team now, after a launch of, let's say, beta, after 5 days, there is a CSAT score that comes in. There is a there is a NPS score in some cases that comes in, or in some cases the customers onboarded, like even how many people came onto your platform, how many people are repeat customers, all these data, right? Like standard data. I'm not going to overkill you all with that. Like who are the ready to pay, who are actually moved from a free to a paid customer, who are retained customer. Data starts coming from here. And now when you get that loop back, you now start analyzing that, hey, when I moved my feature 2 by, let's say, I extended few nice to have features on my my sprint 2 of or say the feature number 2, what happened is CSAT started increasing by say 10%. Then you basically have a positive reinforcement that, hey, feature 2, which was the only incremental uptick that we did from version 1 to version 2, resulted directly in a 10% increase in CSAT. Great. Now that means this feature is really, really looked up by the customer. So initially you might have built a weightage metric across the 6 features. Feature 1 is 10%, feature 2 is 20% in weightage, feature 3 is 22% or something like that, right? So now you bring it back and you start reiterating it. Okay, oh, this made a significant impact. Is it only 10%? Maybe we were wrong in that. Maybe this is 15%. So you start basically doing that iterative model. And eventually you will start having a matrix for your product with features, which basically tells you that if there is a positive or negative story coming back on one of the feature, how important it is for you. Imagine if security is 40%, again, going back to that example, right? If security is 40% and suddenly people are saying that, hey, because of this app, my phone is getting hacked. And the weightage of that is 40%. Would you want to wait for 1 month and say, yes, I will basically do it after 1 month? No, that's a fire drill. That becomes like you have to say, I have to send out a patch in 2 days, else I lose my customers. So that's how I think it becomes very situation based, Shweta. I think I'm sure there's no, unfortunately, I can't give you a time frame, but usually that's how you have to react. You have to basically look at how significant a particular feedback is when you tie back it to a particular feature and how important that feature is in your product roadmap itself. Okay, I see some chat. Is that
Vignesh, we have few more questions
sure?
from the attendees who have joined us via LinkedIn.
So please go ahead. I'll try to address it now.
So we have a question from Mritunjay Kumar. He says MVP at the cost of non-robust architecture to meet GTM, is it suggestible?
MVP, which is not robust. Okay. I would say, see, it's a fine blend there, right? Like, you don't want to be going too far into your product development cycle, trying to get that ideal MVP, and then basically see that the market is not even ready because market has moved on, or say the customers have already been hit by another product which had very similar concepts. So the fine balance is, yes, you don't want to be going with half cooked product like MVP in itself. That's why understanding the must haves is extremely critical, right? And why launch why launch a product which doesn't even have a login facility, if that's the question, right? Like, if you don't even have the bare metal requirements, that's not even MVP according to me. The moment I call it as MVP, it means that it addresses the minimal requirements that's required for a successful product. The word successful product is not removed from minimal viable product, right? You still need to be good with that product that is launched because it doesn't have the frills. Example, again, let's take the Google Maps example, right? When you are traveling in I do a lot of driving, and I travel to remote parts of India, and I love to drive. The biggest worry in some 6 years, 7 years back was the network not being there, and you basically the Google Map freezes and it stops giving directions. But I used to think those days how good it would have been that I could have had a downloadable version, and basically it still showed me the way. But yes, it might have not given me real-time insights about is there a traffic jam or should I avoid something, a better route and all. But how good it would have been for me to at least have something which would continue my navigation. Now, as a product, when you're driving, you might think as a product manager, you're driving and you're like, why don't they have this as a must-have? But the must-have for me is actually not the must-have that 90% of the 100% of the customer target might be. Their point at that point in time was, hey, Google Maps primary users are people who are actually traveling within the city. And they are the ones who basically want to move from point A to point B. And the assumption is like, yeah, they will have network. And for now, we don't want to complicate our development by putting together too many algorithms and trying to download version and all those kind of offline versions. So they went with an MVP which worked, but it had its limitation when you went outside network, which all of us were okay with. And that's how people started the adoption. Like it started getting more and more adoption and all those stuff. But the challenge is, if flip it on the other side, if it gave wrong directions, would Google Maps would have been a success story? Certainly not. If the Google's way of digitizing the map itself was incorrect, it showed your friend's house at a different place than where it was supposed to be. Those were like the must-haves, right? They would not have even succeeded if that MVP product didn't take you from point A to point B correctly. That was it. So I would say, again, a long answer, but the simple thing is these things are not so straightforward that we can say that, hey, 5 features means we can go to market, 2 features means we can go to market. No, it all depends upon what you classify as a must have, and that is where the smart product managers come in, right? Like, for all you know, if I would have been in the product management role or in Google Maps, I would have said no, offline also is very important, and I might have just missed the entire development cycle by delaying it further. But someone smarter would have told, let's park it, let's take it 1 year down the line, let's get customers onboarded onto Google Map and look at where it is now, right? Like, it's ubiquitous. People are becoming. Today I saw a post in my Instagram. It came, someone went and left their car inside a stream or something because maps told them to just take a left or something. That's the level of dependency we have kind of got into because of the adoption. So again, please look at it with look at it from both lens. You want to have all the must-haves when you're taking MVP to the market.
Thank you, Vignesh. We also have a question from Hari Santhanam.
Okay.
No, actually, we have one more question from Hari Santhanam.
Hmm?
For startups that are bootstrapped, assuming they are offering a useful product, GTM timing and other parameters are quite well planned. How can they cross the adoption chasm and start selling large mainstream customers?
Awesome. I think I don't know whether he knew what I'm going or fantastic. So that's my next slide. Okay. So how do you basically jump the chasm that we basically, I think thanks Hari for leading me into this next slide. So this is very interesting slide that you have, right? Like this, and it's not my slide. You can find it anywhere. I basically took it from the one of the, I have the source there. So if you look at it, every product has this particular adoption strategy. You will always have some early enthusiasts who will basically be like tech enthusiasts who are like the innovators. Then you will find a small set of around 13% or 15% of the people who are ready to even take your MVP and run. And that's where I think the question from Hari comes, right? Like most of the startups that I talk or where I see are in that early market phase, right? Like, and the mature ones obviously have been successful in jumping over to the other mainstream market. So when you have your MVP product, you basically are dealing with folks who are ready to even embrace half-cooked products. So example, I can see my own, I can take my own life cycle, right? Like the way my father or my parents assess a new technology vis-a-vis me, vis-a-vis my I think my 7-year-old is very different. Like my dad will take a week to or a month to get familiarized with Zoom. I will take maybe a week. I would have to taken to adopt Zoom and basically understand everything. When my daughter's class became online during the pandemic, trust me, folks, in 2 days, the kids were just hands-on. I don't know how they did it. She started teaching me some of the cool features, right? Like, hey, you can annotate like this, you can do this, you can do that. And I had no idea about it. So you will always have this big problem that you see about the chasm that you see. It's not a continuous flow where visionaries to pragmatists, you cannot move right away. And that is where you really need to be very cognizant that your MVP will not work. Let me not be brutal here. I'll not say not work is not the word. You will be challenged to basically penetrate into your pragmatists if your MVP has not been refined to a product which resonates with that 34% of early majority. Example, look, let's take a very nascent, like the most spoken about example, right? I don't know how many of you still are even interested or how many of you invest in, like, say, cryptos and other things. I, for one, still have not been able to spin my head around, like, should I invest or not? I'm still there. I'm thinking about it. I'm looking at it. I'm really keen. I'm observing it. So for all you know, I'm the pragmatist here. I'm basically, I know the underlying technology is blockchain. I've done a course in blockchain to understand what's the technology that crypto is using. But I'm not the one who still invested anything there. I know a few of my friends who jumped onto the Bitcoin journey 7 to 8, 6, 7 years back. For all you know, they are the innovators who didn't even think. For them, a new cool feature that came into the market, I have to try it. It's something that you cannot teach them, or you cannot basically go and poach those kind of people. They are inherently there to experiment new things that's there in the market, right? And for them, MVP is like amazing. Oh, great, it works. Like, I am able to understand this MVP product. I'm able to use it. And you'll find at least one of your friend circle, you'll find one or two such geeks who will come and keep talking about new technology. Hey, I adopted this. Hey, this is there. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? So Based on that buzz, please don't put together a strategy thinking it's going to be so easy that now you can go and capture the 68% that you see as pragmatists and the conservatives. You have to now start being smarter by using your 15% of early adopters in the early market to go ahead and understand the market through their lens. And then basically, rather than even this pragmatist, right? It's not like it's a huge bulk of 34%. The way the analysis, or at least the thesis on this particular adoption life cycle, if you read it completely, each line from 15% to 15%, which is the chasm, to that plus 34% is like a 1%, 1%, 1% adding. So rather than thinking all 34%, think 1% at a time. How can I get the first 1% of pragmatists hooked onto my MVP? That's far more easier for you, because the 1% who are on the extreme left of pragmatists are very close to the extreme right visionaries. And that's where your MVP product, if you enhance it and take it to that first 1% of pragmatists, they will adopt, they will again come back to you, they'll give you feedback. Now you are entering into a new segment or a new customer segment altogether, right? You have ventured into a segment of pragmatists who are willing to take your product, and they're giving you feedback also. And now that you are gone to that segment, you are getting the right type of feedback for that segment, because the early adopters feedback will not resonate with a pragmatist. My friend who speaks so much about Bitcoin still has not been able to convince me on the other side. But if one of my someone who is like me starts investing, and I see 10 more people like me, my profile, starting to invest, I might then say, hey, 10 people are already there, let me also go ahead. So that's how you want to convert one pragmatist at a time, and then get feedback. Again, enhance your MVP. By now it is already, you can't call it actually MVP by now. It's almost in the growth phase of your product life cycle. You're going into the growth trajectory, you're going to add more features. You will now go to your laundry list of good to have features. Nice to have is still part, but you will start scanning through them. And that's how you start slowly moving and jumping across the chasm. And you now cut one layer. It's like cutting a cake, one slice at a time, right? You slice, win over, learn, move to the next slide, move to the next slide. And by the time you are on the early majority, you have enough data points now to basically go ahead and go to the conservatives. Conservatives, again, I've always seen that they always bring with their own set of lot of questions. So it becomes more of a price point talk and all those kind of stuff, right? So it goes into a completely different dynamics altogether. They, for all you know, they are not really interested in the product features. It's more like, okay, I have heard a lot that this product does good work on this particular area. It solves the problem. By the way, this is my problem. Tell me how many I need to buy and how can I basically get the best deal, and all those kind of conversations. I see another question. It's Parul, for a product that's already in the market, and as you release each feature, how do you find the right fit for new features and balance vis-a-vis use of your current product? How to convince existing customers to try them and your internal team to go ahead? Okay, great. Yeah, I think this again boils down to what you're choosing as your next big product release, right? Like if you have heard from the customer correctly, and if that's where the quality of data becomes very critical, right? And now that I've opened up almost 3-4 different ways of looking at things, imagine that if all your let me annotate and show you. If imagine all your analysis has happened here, and you're building your hypothesis based on this particular segment, and you're telling that, hey, guess what, the market needs more cool features, and you burn your cash building cooler features. But that will never ensure that you are basically jumping the chasm, because for all you know, the same set of people who already are adopters are going to use more of the product, but that has not done anything to basically capture the next segment. So it has to be one. Your point is extremely correct. Like you are saying that it has to be one feature at a time, and one feature at a time. If you go ahead, you have to you have to have a smart way of telling that uh, let me rephrase it in this way. If it is one feature at a time, you get a clear idea as to how much impact that feature is had on the positive or negative impact at the customer side. But usually you never go with one feature, right? Like unless and until it's an emergency patch or something that you're doing, your product roadmap always has few features lined up for every release. It's not like today you wake up and say in 2 months you're going to have a new product launch or a new product like a new version coming. When we take a product, we basically have chalked out multiple versions in the product roadmap, right? Like, and when you have more than 4 or 5 features going at a time, already over a list of say 5 features, it becomes extremely tough to understand which feature has positively enabled your product and positively enhanced the value of the product, and which feature has actually dinged your product from a customer lens. So it's a play here for you to use your data very wisely, Parul. You have to basically validate both primary and secondary research techniques. You have to lose it. And for me, the simplest answer is I prefer a lot of A/B testing in the beta phase, because that's where you are not actually opening up the Pandora's box in front of everyone. You basically are in a controlled environment. You're getting all the analysis and validation done in a controlled environment. You're not the beta customers are still willing to give you that what is it, extra mile to basically refine things. So try as much as possible to do your refinements in the beta trials and then basically go from there. That's number one. Second, how do you convince your existing customers? That's where I think the big focus nowadays, if you see, is on customer retention and customer experience. There is a separate leadership track which has been started on CX. I don't know how many of you are aware of it. Every SaaS company or every customer centric company nowadays has a customer experience team, which that entire job is to basically sit and analyze customer adoption, customers usage, why customers are not logging in, like are they regular users, how much time do they spend, what's you think about the metrics that comes out of platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. The CX teams there, the main thing is basically to sit and analyze it. And you will be really astonished that there are two ways. There are some customers like the B2B, you might see telecalling and digital marketing and all coming in, where people are basically connected. They talk like, hey, you have been a regular user, this is coming in, do you want to experiment it, blah, blah, blah. That is one side of it. But have you all experienced sudden pop-ups coming in the apps that you use a lot or the platforms that you visit a lot? I use a lot of LinkedIn, and many a times I get to use beta trials even before it is live. They're fine to expose that beta in trial sort of a feature, like, hey Vignesh, do you want to onboard and check these beta features that we are planning to launch? As someone who uses that platform widely and extensively, they choose their customers or their users who are going to be conversions, and they basically then float the message to these target customers. Many a times, like people like me, when we see a new feature in LinkedIn, will say, yes, I would want to try it. Then I start getting more familiarized with it, and I start adopting it. And in the process, I start telling this to others also, right? So that's how basically you might want to work with your existing customers as and when a new feature gets launched. There are multiple ways to do it. It's a completely digital marketing, and all those are huge areas that we can't cover today. But that's where usually the CX, digital marketing, and all those kind of play come into picture. I hope I was able to address it. But yeah, these are great questions. But yeah, these are all huge sessions in themselves. So pardon me if I'm not able to do justice to that entire topic. But yes, that's at a nutshell, that's how basically you can go about it. Okay, I think I see a empty window now. So let me quickly go across. Yes, I think I'll finally wrap this quickly because I want to talk a bit. I know we have only around 40 minutes left. I want to talk a bit about pricing also. So the key aspects for understanding your profit, right? Like I think I've already spoken. You have to have your revenue structure in place and your cost structure, right? And when you have a product, successful product, when you know that your MVP has been adopted, your strategy might start changing, because now, as Hari asked that question as to how to move over the chasm, imagine if you jumped over the chasm and you are now slowly penetrating into the actual market. Basically, that's when you have to start looking at wide range of revenue structures, right? I mean, who are all you going to charge for the product or service? Who are you going to charge? Are you going to charge the consumer? Are you going to charge, if you're an aggregator, are you charging at both sides? What all? Similarly, how do you want to charge them? Like, are you going to look at licensing models? Are you going to do a usage-based models, etc., etc.? We'll talk about it. And finally, like, how do you want customers to pay? Like, do you want customers to pay upfront and basically buy your subscription and then use it as much as possible, or you want to have periodic payments? It's all like, imagine it's like Tata Sky. Do you want to pay every month, or do you want to do a 12 month plus 1 month free for an upfront payment, right? Like, so all these are monetization, the payment billing constructs that you can basically play with. And costs, I think there are a lot of costs associated with your day-to-day activities. You have to look at costs associated with product development, the costs associated with marketing, operating costs. There are other overheads that you have to deal with. So unless and until all these are put together, your left side and right side basically have to be really, really correct. And that's when you basically can come up and tell that, hey, my product will get this much amount of profit. And if I basically assume that these many customers are through X customers, if I'm getting this profitability, and I'm assuming a growth rate of say X%, Y%, that will basically lead me to have a product which can give maybe these many millions over the next 12 months or 16 months or whatever you want to do. So that's how basically you build the profit model, because this is absolutely critical for you to have a successful business. Having a product in itself which is successful doesn't make you a successful product leader, or end of the day a product successful company. You have to successfully monetize it. You have to successfully retain your customers as paid customers. And these are the bigger challenges that you face once you move towards the right hand side of the chasm that I was showing. Early adopters, it's still easy. The moment you go to the right hand side, they are really, really tough people sitting there. Every penny that they spend, they really analyze and ask, what value am I getting out of this every dollar that I'm basically throwing away? So be careful about these aspects. Time and again, come back and do this analysis, because this is what is going to make your success story translate into a profit model, basically. I see a question. Let's take it quickly. Thanks. Okay, that's great. Okay, and let's move on now finally to pricing. So now if you look at it, right, like how do, even in my personal life, right, like how did I finally land up in pricing? I myself, I don't have an idea. Let me be honest. It's not like I consciously woke up and I said, okay, I will become a pricing expert through my product and product knowledge, experience. I will eventually become a person who goes deep into pricing. I never visualized it in that way, right? Like I just started enjoying the complexities that pricing started throwing at us, right? Like pricing is a very, very flexible factor, and it basically is one of the most dynamic factor which can impact your business very quickly. I mean, no better place to understand pricing than the e-commerce platforms that you all have. Just open your your apps, Amazon or Flipkart or Meesho's of the world, and you will see, as of today, there'll be like tailor-made deals for you, or there could be deals which are designed for next 15 minutes or 30 minutes. I mean, think about it. What are those deals? It's not like they're adding cool features into a product. It's all on the price point play, right? Like the same, let's say, cosmetic or a health product or whatever you want to call. If you have a need and you know that you're going to any which ways consume, pricing ensures that you can monetize that product right now. Imagine if someone says, example, again, let's go back to a cab guy. If you go and say, hey, I'm going to give you diesel at 10% discount, if you book a order today in the next 15 minutes, it's a no-brainer. You will get cash right now in your account, because the cab guy any which ways is going to use the 50 liters in the next 2-3 days. So that's how impactful sometimes pricing can be, to basically get your end of sale or your entire quote to cash complete. Basically, that's one. Second, direct impact on revenue and profitability, right? Like, there is no clearer metric than price, which defines what your revenue would be and what your profitability would be. If your cost remains constant, price point, the selling price, is the one that basically determines whether you are profitable and what revenues you will land up. So it's that important a lever to understand. Else you will just basically be a great like product designer, but you might not be a very successful product evangelist or product end-to-end product leader. Basically, it creates the first impression. I mean, you can find 100 examples in internet that where prices have been positively reinforcing people, and sometimes it has been detrimental. Two classic examples. I still don't know many people how they just can pay the premium for Apple phones, right? Because it's perceived, it's a premium product. It's no longer about, like, why would you pay so many millions to get a Ferrari? Why would you pay so many millions to get a let's say what is it, the high-end designer dresses that we get in the market? End of the day, if someone comes with this mindset that let's break down the cost associated with it, okay, it has the same material, it's a tailor, end of the day stitching it, a designer coming and putting together, why is it being sold at such exorbitant price? That's because of the perceived value. It's the impression that, like, I cater only to the premium segment. Once you have made up that mind, basically price is something that makes you visualize that, hey, this is basically a premium product. Similarly, how many of you have booked hotels in your recent past based on price point alone? There could be an extremely good resort which is giving you a room for 3,000 rupees, but and as compared to another resort which is not giving a quality room at, say, 7,000 bucks, but we still would perceive that, hey, that is 7,000. For all you know, that resort will give more features. And that's the impact sometimes price can leave. And it plays the other way also, right? Like, I mean, I hate it, but I have to take the example of Tata Nano sometimes, right? Because people perceive car as a status symbol in India, right? Like, people want to showcase their wealth and their status symbol by showcasing their car. So their first thing that comes to mind is like, I don't want to buy a car which is made to look like a poor version of a car, or upgrade to my motorcycle and all. And the moment you started telling that it's like a 1 lakh car, and it's just hey, now bikers can now go safely in a car and etc., people started shying away, because they didn't want to bring an asset which was still 1 lakh is a big amount, and they didn't want to invest in 1 lakh and bring something in where people started saying that, hey, yeah, maybe that person didn't have enough money to buy a bigger car, and that's why they got a. And that's the impression that a price point can bring on. Had it not been like widely marketed and spoken like a 1 lakh car, etc., etc., and all, for all you know, that it would have been a success story, is what I feel. I mean, it's my personal take. It could have been a great alternative for the traffic that we have in this metros. But yes, let's see how it rebrands and comes back into the market. But price can have both positive and positive reinforcement and negative impact on the perceived value. And yes, I think it's key driver for sales promotions. It's easy way to compare. As I said, I took the example of hotel. It's very easy. People perceive like 7,000 should be always better than 3,000. That's how it is. And significant impact on the overall brand. I spoke all these points, right? So that's the criticality that we are dealing with when it comes to prices. It's what the customer sees. That's the biggest problem that I always felt as a pricing person, right? Everyone finally gets a rate card. It's like going through the menu card of your hotel, right? Like you basically go and start looking at the dishes. If you are price conscious, you will always start looking at like, hey, a dosa for 200 bucks. What is this guy? I don't want to ever turn up on this in this particular restaurant anymore because this is ridiculous. But someone might say that, okay, the dosa actually is for 40 bucks. The 160 that I'm paying is for an experience of fine dining. I'm absolutely fine with that. So imagine how that 200 rupees is perceived by different customers. And that's the problem for a pricing strategy person, because you don't have one size that fits everyone. Customers are different. Customers think differently. And that's why you have to constantly keep working on your prices and innovate so that you can keep addressing different segments using the same product that you have. Okay, I see a question. Let's how higher CAC affect pricing decision. Okay, great question, Girish. I think customer acquisition cost, right? Like it all depends upon your um, current phase of your product also. Like, would you care about customer acquisition cost when you are bootstrapped and you are really desperate to get customers? The answer would be like, I don't really see people coming and asking me pricing questions at a bootstrapping level, or even at like even at a very early funding phase. They are so focused on getting the product correct, right? Like they have to build. They have a hypothesis that a customer has a problem, and I have to design a product which can MVP product in the first place, and I have to get it to the market so that I can get to the customer quickly. That's their first mindset at that point in time. Once the maturity happens, once customers actually are repeat customers, you are getting into billing, you're getting into scaling, that's when actually pricing becomes a big question. Because now you cannot just guesstimate that what could be a price. You have to be scientific in your pricing strategies. You can't basically come and randomly and say that, okay, the customer who paid 100 rupees in the past will continue paying 100 rupees in the past. You might have got competitors coming up. You might have suddenly seen that the customer might have exceeded the expectation, because now they're like, hey, this is okay, but I still need more, sort of. So I would say it is a combination of a lot of factors, Girish. It's yes, CAC will, like a higher CAC will obviously unnerve as a mature product manager. When my product is actually in the growth phase, if the CAC is very high and if my price doesn't even cover my CAC, I'll be really concerned, because then I'm bleeding. How long can I bleed money? And the product leader who I report to will eventually start asking, Vignesh, is your growth even a organic growth, or are you just showing artificial growth here? If I basically keep burning cash and I just say that, hey, use this product for free, it's okay, just be a customer, eventually it will start breaking, right? So I think at an early phase, you still are not really worried about, but as you grow, your point is valid. Like I can't sustain a low price, like I can't have a pricing model or a pricing strategy which doesn't even cover my acquisition costs. I hope I was able to address it. Okay. See something on the chat. Sir, will you be sharing the slides? Okay, I'll see how I can share it, and maybe the institute can take it from there. Okay, let's move on to the final three bits. I think we are almost we have 25 minutes. I think it's good that we are coming to the slide at this point in time. So how do you basically leverage pricing? I think sometimes it's an analysis that I was reading in the internet that on an average, how much time some of the startups and some of the nascent early stage companies use to come up with that pricing strategy. I don't know. I still, it's not, please don't quote my, this is I can share this link also. it was written that from the analysis of that firm, they found out that some early stage companies spend no more than 6 to 8 minutes to get their price. 6 to 8 minutes. So that's what is sometimes how people bring pricing to the equation. It's like pricing is more like a hindsight. Like it's like, okay, I've got the product, I've got customers, great, all high fives are growing, and people are like, now, okay, how much should I charge? Oh, that's $1 million question. Why don't we try with 100 rupees? Sometimes decisions pan out in that fashion. Trust me, I'm not over trivializing the situation. But if you really have to go in depth on pricing, you really start need to understanding that pricing has three major tenets when you're playing with. There is a pricing model. Okay. Pricing model is your first layer of security. Price, if you get pricing model incorrectly, it is a catch-up game forever. You will never be able to, again, I don't want to be too harsh. Some exceptions can happen, but it will be extremely tough for you to have a successful and thriving business if you do not get your pricing model correct upfront. And then if you're trying to use your pricing strategies and all other techniques to try to do a catch-up, you will constantly be in this catch-up game. So what is a pricing model? A pricing model is usually something that is striking a balance between the value that you're delivering to the customer and the revenue that you're generating out of that value that you're providing. Again, techniques like value-based pricing again come in, and that's why one of the most spoken and like everyone loves value-based pricing, right? Because people think that yes, that's the fairest way of monetizing your product, because you're positioning your price point based on the perceived value of that particular product that you're delivering, which solves a customer problem. So somewhere you have to have this defined very clearly. And this in itself is extremely tough, because as I'll show you some models, I have to breeze through it. Unfortunately, I don't think I can go in depth on each of the models. I have it in the appendix slide. I'll show it, but you can go through and read each one of those models, have like research papers on them in them. Like there are individual research papers on each of these models. So I'll briefly touch upon so that you have some idea about what are the pricing models, and you can always build on that from there on. So once you have the pricing model, the next is the pricing strategy, right? Like the going back to the adoption cycle, right? Like you have to now get your pricing model defined during your early market phase. If you are going to come and define your pricing model in your maturity phase or growth phase, it's going to be, I think it will be very tough. So better try to get your pricing model ready before you actually try to jump the chasm. And once you're trying to jump the chasm, that's when the strategies come into picture. Because now, as I said, one size doesn't fit everyone. Customers are different and customers' expectations are different. So you will have to keep reinventing your pricing strategies to get the maximum out of the product that you're delivering to the market. How many times have you heard this phrase that I think I might have left some dollars on the table? There are so many times that you will come into a business review meeting where someone might say, hey, what do you think about this deal? And either someone would say, yeah, I think it was, or it was overpriced. I think the customer was not really happy, but somehow the customer, we were able to push it, but it was a very tough sell. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is when they said, yeah, I think we left some dollars on the table. And I have been privy to a lot of these pricing reviews, and I have had very limited exposure where people came and said, hey, optimum price, fantastic. I think that those are exception rare scenarios, right? So that's why playing with strategies becomes very important. Again, I'll show some strategies. It will help you basically as product managers understand how you can play with pricing as in your strategy basically. And once you've got these two things and the product is like totally mature, you are basically like you have penetrated, you have a very big market share, you're there. What do you do now? How do you leverage? You're not going to suddenly go and imagine, like, will you ever go and tell that, okay, from today I'm going to sell Adidas shoe or a Nike high-end shoe based on the usage model? Will you ever say that, okay, my pricing model now is going to be $10 per hour you're going to wear your shoes? It can't be. Like, it's too tough to even visualize something like that unless and until you built a product early up thinking that that would be a pricing model. So now how do you go about it? You go into psychological phases, like psychological angles of putting together a price in front of customer and creating a psychological effect where they perceive something out of the prices that you're flashing in front of them. Example, why, like, some of the beautiful things that you see in these upgrade scenarios in flights, right? They will send you a nice email a week before or something saying that, hey, for $1,000 just upgrade to business. Why do you want to go in economy? And they'll have a nice three, four pictures which will show that, hey, you will get a lounge access, you will get a premium access to this, you will be first to board the plane, you'll have priority baggage claim, etc. And you just look at it and you look at the price there which says 1,000 rupees and you're like looking at four. As a customer, you'll be like, okay, 250 rupees per feature. Okay, I think I'm not that, I'm okay with that. So you're creating that number 1,000 with that visual aid now is far more impactful than at the point of sale when you're booking the ticket. Imagine you're shown three numbers: 3,500, 4,500, 6,000. Example. No one is going to go and say that, okay, can I see what's the difference between 3,500 to 4,500? Can I see what's the add-ons I'm getting from 4,500 to 6,000? For all you know, the customer has this. 90% of the customer might say cheapest, 3.5. What the hell? It's just a flight from here to Goa, maybe. That's it. What's the big deal? Let me take a 3,000 flight or 3,500 flight. But when it comes to the customer in this package, just pay $1,000 and you get these things. The 1,000 price is now perceived in a very different way. It's a psychological effect. I start visualizing, oh, how can I jump the queues? Oh, how can I get my baggage and walk out of the airport quickly and beat the queue? How it's great to have some in-flight food. I don't need to go through the hassle of ordering and waiting for it. You suddenly see a very different psychological effect that you have from that price that I'm throwing. So that's the final phase where you start squeezing the last dollar out of the customer through the value that you are basically giving to the customer. So these are the three things. I think we have around 15 minutes. I would want to quickly take 5 to 10 minutes to just quickly go through the different pricing model, pricing strategies, psychological pricing, and leave that with you all. You can note it down. You can read more about it. It's widely available on net. And the last 5 minutes or something, I would just want to wrap up. I want to take some interactive questions and then basically wrap up the session for all of you. Okay, I see a question. Freemium model. Girish, is it a question or you want me to elaborate on freemium? I couldn't get are you answering or is it a question? Do you want to know more about freemium model? Okay, maybe that I'll assume that it's okay. I get another thing. Okay, what's a freemium model? I think I'll go to the models. I think then you will all make it. It's there here. So yes, Girish wants to know what is a freemium model, and great. Let's quickly go through. So for me, there are multiple models with which you can start your own business or start your own product definition and build your product, etc. These are the classic ones. You either put a flat rate where you say it's 500 rupees per month or $500 per month, etc. You can do it usage-based. Classic cases is the electricity bill that we get. We don't get a random bill. We get it based on what we use. So it's a usage-based pricing, tiered pricing. Again, you see that in the electricity bills, right? First 1,000 units, maybe it's for 3 rupees per unit. But if you are exhausting too much of valuable resource, they are not going to give you the luxury of just pulling so much power from the grid. So what they're going to do is say 1,000 to 2,000, 4 rupees. For the 2,000 onwards, you better pay 7 rupees or something. So basically, you're having a tiered structure so that it ensures that no one is abusing your product, right? Like it can basically like heavy users basically will be cautioned, and it basically becomes wide. It's more appealing to people because people will sometimes feel that yes, it's a fair use of of the product that is being given to me. I am not, imagine if someone is using Office 365 once a week and someone is using it almost every minute, and both of them are just exchanging notes between each other, and look at the plight of the person who uses this once a week, right? For all you know, they might ask like, hey, why am I paying so much when I'm not even using it? And for all you know, that will be the genesis of them basically saying, should I even renew it in the next case? Can I live with the free trial itself? Why should I even go and pay it? So to discourage those kind of things, it's better to have a differentiation between someone who uses the product extensively and someone who is hardly at the top end of usage, the low end of usage, basically. Per user pricing, it's very straightforward. You license the product per user, per active user. This is something that the industry has really evolved, because nowadays you want to give more value back to the customer, right? Like you want customers to feel that they are not being pushed into a corner and said, hey, you have to buy 1,000 licenses and I don't care if you're going to use 1,000. If you use 400 also, I don't care about it. Rather than that, you want to basically make it very fair by telling that, hey, I'll charge you for the active user that you basically have. So that's another variant. Nowadays, you even see per feature pricing, which is taking it even a notch further, right? Like you want to get the, like that's why you see a basic to goes to standard goes through to a pro goes to an enterprise, and maybe there is a premium. You don't want to have 5 tiers and all, but ideally you see 3 tiers. It's basic, standard, advanced, something of that nature. But that's how basically people build per feature pricing, right? Like for each feature that you basically keep adding, you might start adding some prices, and you differentiate the prices based on actually the features that is gone. And finally, the freemium business, right? Like I think that's what was the question. Like you offer a free to use product with additional paid features or packages. There are, I think that's the in the SaaS world that I come from. This has been one of the models, go-to models these days, because you get a very high initial adoption, right? Like when I know that the MVP product is good enough to do a lot of basic things, adoption becomes easier. I basically know that, okay, I can use the product to basically even get my basic needs covered. So they start adopting. Example, the Dropbox example that I was going to talk about, right? The freemium model, like the free model of Dropbox is good enough for me to even start it. Like I can basically, similarly, the iCloud, I get a free storage, which is good enough for me in many cases, unless I'm a heavy user, right? So people adopt naturally, and there is a huge adoption when you offer the basic MVP as a free for usage. And some of the products can really go viral, like TikToks of the world, right? Like the usage just exploded because the premium model itself, free version itself, was so good. On the flip side, sometimes I wonder how many of the TikTok users are actually paid users, and that's where the question comes in, like how much MVP is a free MVP? Because if your MVP itself is so good and it is offered for free, how would you convert that customer into a paid customer? So that's the big dilemma that you get in the freemium model. Where do I draw that line where I don't start killing the product because the free version is far more like appealing to people? Second, any changes that you make, like any change you make on the monetization model, any change that you make on the feature, if you roll back one feature from the MVP and say it's no longer free for you, you will see a huge churn of customers. Suddenly you will see like 50% of your like a daily users are no longer there. And that is actually very unnerving when you are basically as a product manager to see a data that comes that, hey, you lost 50% of your active customers in the last week. So the WAC and the MAC and all those things, like weekly active users, MAU, all those like WAU, all these are critical metrics that you have to live day in, day out. And you don't want to be standing in front of your leaders seeing 50% of your active users just went away in a week's time. That's the flip side of this. And finally, Customer do not upsell. What do they do if they don't upsell from? They are not ready for any paid version. They just are so happy with their free version. They don't really want to even go to your paid version. That you can't pull off the free version. You have to keep burning your resources to basically help them run that. So where do you draw that line? So it becomes extremely tough for us to maintain this freemium model. Okay, there's a question. When looking at pricing a product while benchmarking against revenue increase and cost decrease for the customer, what are the things to be cautious about? Oh, that's a complex question, Parul. When looking at pricing at a product while benchmarking against revenue increase and cost decrease for the customer, what are the things to be cautious about? Yes, so see, I would take it from the revenue side, right? Like, see, the cost side for the customer, I don't think you can basically predict it, right? Like, it's extremely tough for you to figure out what the cost for the customer side would be. But from a revenue side for you, like, how do you increase revenue? You don't want to basically price your product in such a way that it becomes very clear to the customer that I'm not going to even touch that product, basically. Like, because of the simple fact that I think your question now makes sense. Like, you are correct. Like, if your question is heading towards this fast, I don't know if I'm elaborating your question correctly, but if you're pricing your product at a premium with additional features that you're launching, which assumes that the customer has to invest more on some underlying infrastructure where they have to upgrade or they have to basically burn some more cash to get to use that particular features that you're launching. Yes, it's a very delicate balance. It's a great question, because for all you know, you are assuming that I'm adding a cool feature which will do, example, let's take an example. I'm adding a cool feature which will do real-time analytics of text or speech. Like, as I speak, am I confident? I'm not confident. If you all are basically getting it live, yes, the mentor or say the faculty is confident about this topic. Imagine there is a software which is running, which is assessing my speech and telling, yes, his answer is very confidently, he's answering it. He is not very comfortable with this topic. If you're getting a live feed like that, imagine a product like that, and you perceive it as a amazing feature to have it, and you launch it, and you basically price it like say $100 over the base version. There is a need. For all you know, there is a target segment of like educational sector where people who are on online domains. For all you know, those platforms might want to run this software so that they get to assess the faculty who are delivering the speech, right? Like, for all you know, now I'm delivering it on this platform. If something of this nature was there, they could run it real time for 2 hours and then basically give a report card to me saying that, Vignesh, you are 80% confident throughout the session. There is a need. But imagine if the platform has to upgrade to a higher configuration to even run that particular software, because the data has to be real time churned out, right? So the cost to upgrade, if it is too high, even then it basically, your revenue is not going to go up, because for all you know, the higher price is becoming detrimental because the cost is going up, the price is also going up, and the customer is feeling squeezed here, and they basically will not even subscribe to it, and your product no longer might be even attractive. And that is where I think the conundrum of your revenue starting to shrink comes in. From your lens, you feel that, hey, cool feature launched, all the customer had to do was basically upgrade their infrastructure. But from the customer lens, hey, you are charging me a premium and you're asking me to even upgrade my infrastructure. Sorry, I don't even want to subscribe to this anymore. So that's where I think I don't know whether that was your question, intention behind the question, but if I read through the 3 lines, this is what I could make. But great question. It's a absolute use, like, you can do a lot of analysis on this, and that's where I think the expertise of the product manager comes in. And these are the situations that you will face where you have to take a very, very cognitive call, right? Do I go and give that as a feature, or do I basically support the customer without hampering the customer? How can I support this feature? all those questions start coming in. It becomes an engineering play. You go and talk to the architecture and engineering team. That's where product managers need to have a technical technical inclination. You need to ask like, hey, can we not push this to a customer? Can we do it on cloud? Can we basically ensure that they just get to sign on, single sign on to get in? Imagine how much conversation you can have as a product manager, but it all starts from this question that you basically asked. I hope I did justice to that, but yes, let's, in the interest of time, I have 5 minutes. So a lot of other things that you can look at, like what's the right pricing strategy. You have penetration pricing, captive pricing. I spoke about skimming, which is what Apple does very nicely. We have prestige pricing, which is more on premium pricing. We have free trials. We have cost plus, which was the old way of doing it. You have a bill of material. You put all the costs together. You then basically say, I want a profit margin of 20%. You basically then fix your selling price. And value-based pricing, we have been speaking over and over. So that's the strategies that you can basically, these are the strategies that you can leverage as you're expanding, as you're going and trying to get more value out of it. And finally, psychological pricing, right? Like it's price anchoring. It's all these are now talking about prices in a very sensitive manner, right? Like which has an impact on the way we look at pricing. Charm pricing. How many of you have seen this 199? 299? Why do you think people, why can't they just put 300? The fact that sometimes 299 is far more appealing than 300 for, I don't know for goddamn what reason, but that's how it is. Like that $1 here and there makes it look far more digestible than starting with a 300 sort of. Then odd even pricing, its competitors are mainly using, again, the charm techniques here. It's basically to get your, like you can always have a different, the way you make it look like ends with 199, or it is 51, 58, or something, all those kind of number games that you basically use, right? That's where it comes from. You can do bundle pricing. You can basically, your best selling product, you try to bundle few more low selling products or whatever, and you basically can come up with a price point and give it to the customers. And there are multiple other things. I think we are running out of time, right? Like we have a lot of other psychological ways of determining prices, which can give you more value out of it. And trust me, these are all the last techniques that you can use after you have tried to do everything that we have spoken about from pricing, right? Like you don't want to make analysis paralysis is what is called, because you don't want people to come and select from 50 packages, one package. You want people to come quickly, look at it from 3-4 packages. All these are things that you do when you are actually at the extreme maturity curve where the product is maturing and everyone knows about it and you're trying to get the maximum out of it, or you're trying to prolong the maturity of the product in the market, basically. Yes, so that's all I had. And I always like to leave the session with the fantastic quote that I saw from Warren Buffett, right? Like, see, price is what you pay. That's what we think, but value is what you get. So when I pay for a particular product, it's not like I'm just I'm just taking the product and just going to live with that product, just enjoying the product. Actually, I'm going to use the product, and when I use the product, it translates into a value that is given to me. And that's the reason we always start looking at the price, the value of a product through the price. Like if you start visualizing, right, like you feel everywhere where you went, you will eventually start slowly associating the product's value with the price that you paid. Unknowingly or knowingly, consciously or unconsciously, we start doing that. You feel very happy when you go and have a great lunch or dinner in a restaurant where what you paid, you felt that it was as per what expectations or what you wanted from the food. If you don't feel that what you got out of that price that you're paying is matching, that's when basically things start falling apart. So remember this. I think all product managers from the other side need to understand that customer views it from this lens. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. That is what basically customers always look at. So you, as a product manager, you have to think that what value am I delivering to the customer, and then start building your price, because unless they both match, it's not going to be a success story for sure. Okay, bang on time, team. I think that's where I would love to end this presentation. And yeah, I hope it was a informative session and all of you could take something away from today's session.
Thank you for delivering a brilliant session, Vignesh. It was really great and thought-provoking. We have already answered many questions, but there are few questions that are lined up. So, are you ready to take that?
Pragya, I'll have to have a hard stop. That's the problem. I need to step out. But I would love to do that. If you have a list of questions, I would definitely try to address it and email it back to you, and maybe you can send it across to the respective folks.
Sure.
But yes, I think, sorry about that.
Yeah. So, in the view of time constraints, we have to end it here. So, thanks for the participation, audience, and give your feedback on the session. And we have enjoyed having you with us, Vignesh. It's a complete pleasure. Please accept the certificate of appreciation from the Institute. The QR code on the certificate will take you to a dedicated hall of fame, each created for you with the recording of the session. Please share it with your network. And thank you, audience. Thank you for joining. It was very interactive session. So don't forget to register for the upcoming events, and have a great week.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.